If your writing isn't doing what you want it to do, or maybe you're just not motivated, there's a good chance there's nothing wrong with your writing. Maybe you just need to try a new process. Welcome to Coffee with the Authors. I'm Mark Parsons. This is Wendelin Van Draanen, and we're just a couple of writers here to help you decode the craft and business of writing.
There are an infinite number of ways to write your novel, and everybody's process is a little bit different. The thing is, with a novel, you can get to a place where you're really discouraged because it's a huge undertaking. It feels at the beginning like it's something you're excited about, but as the work you become aware of how much work it is, sometimes we get discouraged and we don't know, like, it isn't hitting right. Everybody has that. So know that is, you're not alone. And the worst case that I ever had for that was with this spin-off series. I had a successful 4-book series for younger readers called SHREDDERMAN. And there's a spin-off series that was a possibility. And I tried writing it the way I had written the original, the SHREDDERMAN series, in the same kind of style, only it wasn't hitting right. It didn't feel right. I tried writing it in the voice of the boy that the story's about. I tried writing it in the voice of the talking kleptomaniacal gecko lizard, who also stars in this wacky story. And then neither of those really worked. I mean, and it was frustrating because I felt like I had this really funny idea and this really cool setup and funny story, but it wasn't connecting the way that I was used to connecting with a book. And then I tried writing it in the voice of a narrator, which is something I had never done before, and it was wildly fun. I got to do all these alliterations. I got to do this kind of just tongue-in-cheek. It was just so much fun to write, but it took me years to get to the point where I hit on a different approach to the same story. So people will say, try writing in first person, try writing in third person, try blah, 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 really, blah, blah, blah. But really, it's just, know that there are different ways to approach the same story. So if it's not working for you, if you're 30 pages in and you just have lost your flair for it, if it's not working for you, try something different and see if maybe that's what connects you to the story to the point where you can get to the end of the novel.
I have a kind of a similar story, a little bit different, but the same general idea, which is I wrote my first book-length manuscript using a technique I just read about because I had not a clue how to write a novel. And it basically said, make a 1-page outline for every single chapter and then expand upon those. Take each page and expand upon those. And it didn't really work for me. It wasn't a whole lot of fun. A lot of times it's like, okay, what am I doing today? I'm taking my outline for chapter 7, and I'm going to expand that into 10 or 20 pages. And it just felt like doing homework. There was no real organic thought process going on, no creativity. I didn't love the process. And I guess you'd say it didn't work. The book didn't get published. It landed me an agent, and we had some very close calls with it, but luckily it didn't get published because it was all plot and no character. So we're talking about process change here. So for the next thing I sat down to write, I just thought, the hell with that. I'm going to throw all that away. That didn't work for me. I started off kind of thinking I would do it the same way, but then I got into it for about 10 seconds and went, no, this is just no fun at all. I am just going to open a Word doc and start writing in the voice of my main character. The first book was third person with multiple viewpoint characters. So for the next book, I'm just going to start writing in the voice of the main character. And just kind of follow him on his journey and see where he goes and follow him along. So it was a very different process for me, and it maybe it didn't make a lot of sense, but it felt right to me, so I thought I would try it, and it worked out. That became ROAD RASH, which was my first published novel,
Right.
First YA novel, and it got me an agent, a different agent, a much better agent, and it got me a really nice editor, and kind of got me started. So the point is, sometimes if you're stuck, the answer is not, oh, maybe I can't write, maybe my writing's not good, maybe I'm not good. The answer is to think about, this doesn't really appeal to me, so maybe change your process, whatever that is. I'm not saying go from third person to first person. I'm saying just try something different, try a completely different process and see what works for you. So here's a question for you. Have you ever, in the middle of a project, changed your writing process? Did it work for you? And if so, what did you change to?
Everybody's different. So what works for one person may not work for another. And when you find the thing that gives you the joy of the craft, that is what's going to sustain you to the end of the novel writing process. You have to find what that is.
That's the key word right there, joy. It's really follow your joy. As trite, as cliche as that sounds, follow your joy. And I think that joy will be reflected in your book and therefore be kind of transmitted to your readers.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a little confession, which
Confession
is
time.
that my first book for youth, I didn't know that that's what I was doing. I didn't know I
knew.
I was writing for kids. I had been writing novels for adults for a good number of years. And Mark brought home Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine. And I read that as an adult. I had never read it as a kid, and I
So
loved it. And it reminded me of all the mischief my brothers and I got into when we were growing up. And so I wrote a story that I thought was going to be like Dandelion Wine, which I read as an adult, and it worked for me as an adult. So, I put the adult spin on that. And so I embarked on writing this kind of fictionalized version of the mischief my brothers and I got into when we were kids. And it was pretty hefty. I mean, we got a lot of mischief.
Hefty.
So it was a pretty hefty thing. And I, sent it around and it got roundly rejected. But somehow it got passed along to the desk of a children's book editor. I guess someone said, oh, this belongs over in children's. And so it got passed along over there. And that editor really liked it. But her editorial letter to me was, if you'll cut this in half, I'll look at it again. And I remember getting the thing like, this is from a children's editor. What's this doing on a children's editor's desk? I mean, children's.
I've got news for you.
But that was how I wound up writing for kids. And it was the most joyful, like, swerve off of my path. It was amazing. It was an amazing thing. And it also required that I change the process of the way I wrote this story. I had to aim it toward kids. So sometimes the whole creation process winds you up in a place where you have to kind of look at what you've created and decide, is this what I thought it was going to be? And maybe somebody from outside will wind up telling you that this would fit better over here. And then you adjust your process to accommodate that. And you may wind up in a happy, happy place like I am.
After writing a ton of articles and a couple nonfiction books, I started writing fiction. And the first fiction I ever had published was science fiction. They were short stories. And I love science fiction and grew up reading science fiction, short stories. I read the analog magazines and Amazing and Asimov's and all that good stuff. It's in my DNA. One of the stories didn't quite work, but I loved the character. I loved the voice. I loved the vibe. I loved the setting. I loved the character. But the actual plot, it was like everything kind of rushed towards the end and ta-da, it's over. So I just kind of put it aside. And then actually years later, I looked at it again and said, oh, I love this character. And so what I decided to do was, again, this is a process change here. It's like, this isn't a short story. Maybe this is the first chapter, or maybe first 3 chapters probably. I think it was maybe 30, 40 pages of a novel. So I kind of retooled that character, but kept the same voice and the same vibe and the same basic setting, and made that the opening section of a novel, and then went on and finished that novel. And it's one of the better things I've ever written, actually, because I felt like I had the time to fully expand upon or expound upon the character and the setting. Because I'm really character driven, and I wanted to give this woman her voice, her full voice, and not just cram her into 30 pages or so. And it turned out to be one of the better things I've ever written, and it'll be going on sub probably not until next year. We've got a couple other things in front of that, but I really love that story, and it really came out of me taking a fresh perspective on a short story I wrote. It was kind of a failed short story in the sense that it just kind of ended too abruptly. And just kind of, so really what we're saying is, if something isn't quite working, look at it and go, maybe I don't have an adult novel. I have a YA novel. Maybe I don't have a short story. Maybe I have a fairly long, like 100,000 word science fiction novel. Maybe I don't have a mystery. What I really have is a slice of life story, whatever that is. So don't be afraid to kind of back off and take a different view of the work that you're doing.
We hope this was helpful to you. Thanks for coming to spend some time with us. If there's something that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear. We'd love to hear, like, if you're stumped on your process, if there's you feel like you have this thing that hasn't gone anywhere. It's good just to talk with other people about it. So we'd love to see you in the comments. We'll see you next week. Remember, dream big, work hard, don't give up, maybe reanalyze your process.
And as always, keep writing.